Our next speaker is Mark Anthony. He is the psychic lawyer. He is an Oxford-educated attorney and world-renowned psychic medium with a unique blend of legal expertise and spiritual insights. Mark has captivated audiences worldwide. His work has led him to partner with major media outlets such as Gaia, Fox News, NBC, and ABC. Author of best-selling books like Afterlife Frequency, Mark merges science and spirituality, offering compelling evidence of the afterlife and spirit communication. Recently, Mark's live stream show, The Psychic and the Doc, co-hosted with Dr. Pat, won Best Radio Show of the Year. Every Thursday, Mark performs live readings for callers, while Dr. Pat provides intuitive and healing insights, making this show a must listen for those seeking spiritual guidance. Let's welcome Mark.
Thank you, Ash. I want to thank you, Ash, and I want to thank Neil and everyone associated with Portal to Ascension. I especially would like to thank all of the people who have tuned in. Welcome to my presentation, which is the electromagnetic soul and the afterlife frequency. Spirit contact is part of human experience. And since the dawn of recorded history, there have been accounts of communication with spirits. The problem is they come in many different forms and people don't always understand them. They can come in the form of visitations, after-death communication, such as you may feel the presence of a loved one near you. You may catch a glimpse of them in your peripheral vision or in the dream state. That communication can also come through a medium like myself. Spirit contact can occur during what is known as a near-death experience, where people die and their consciousness, their soul, their spirit leaves their body, but then comes back. And they have these incredible tales of going through a tunnel into the light and encountering deceased loved ones, and dare I say, the divine power that we call God. Deathbed visions and shared death experiences, very common, being reported for thousands of years and even more so in the modern era. But unfortunately, spirit communication has often been dismissed as fantasy or feared as paranormal or supernatural. But is the existence of the soul in the afterlife a matter of faith or science? Every great belief system teaches that the soul, the spirit, consciousness, pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and then lives on after the body dies. This brings us to science. The modern era of science really began with Sir Isaac Newton. For all intents and purposes, he invented physics. And in the 18th century, the 1700s, Sir Isaac Newton was nothing less than a superstar of the Enlightenment. And then while quarantined during the plague of 1665, he invented calculus. And he's probably been cursed by every high school and college student since then. But then he also explored and expanded the laws of optics, and he developed the laws of gravity. And reductive materialism emerged. Reductive means that physical matter is made of molecules which are composed of atoms. Materialism means the only thing that can be proven to exist is matter. And according to Newtonians, everything is a mix of matter and energy according to physical laws. Reality is what is observable, objective, and reproducible. And Newtonian reductive materialists believe that the supernatural does not exist, neither do spirits, the afterlife, or God. Paradox, because Sir Isaac Newton believed in God. However, he did not believe in the existence of a soul or an afterlife. And then he spent more time studying the Bible, seeking hidden and cryptic messages in Scripture than he did in science. Now, Think about this for a minute. I'm studying the Bible for hidden said that atheism every great belief system describes the divine power that we call God in terms of light. From the sages of ancient India, the Hindi word for God is Rama. And Rama, who has different manifestations as Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and Lakshmi, many different manifestations, is the light that has lighted the world. Then you go to Judaism, when Moses encountered the bush that was on fire, yet was not consumed by the fire. Now think about this. If you were living in the Bronze Age, like Moses, how would you describe an encounter with an intense form of electromagnetic energy? You would describe it in terms that you were familiar with. In other words, the most powerful form of energy in the Bronze Age that you'd be aware of, outside of lightning, would be fire. Then the Buddha explained that a certain way, code of behavior in treating other people and other beings is the path to the light. Jesus said his teachings were also the path to the light. Islam teaches that the light of Allah, which is simply the Arabic word for God, lights the world. Native American belief systems and other indigenous belief systems from the entire globe all describe God in terms of light. Now, why is that? And it's because we believe that light is how we perceive the spiritual energy that people God. Since the dawn of recorded history, there have been accounts of people who have died, and then they talk about traveling through a tunnel and entering, once again, the light, where they encounter deceased loved ones, and then they return to life. These resurrections have mystified physicians and religious leaders. I give a lot of talks on the science of near-death experiences and the scientific basis for that, because this is how we now describe this phenomenon as near-death experiences. We know from science that life depends on light. Sir Isaac Newton was absolutely correct, that the Earth is the right distance from the sun to get the proper amounts of heat and light. If it weren't for that, Earth would be nothing more than a frozen chunk of rock floating through space. So the light from the sun is then converted through photosynthesis by plants into nutrients. And we as humans consume plants, and we consume animals who consume plants. So the building block of life, as we understand it, begins with the energy of light. Light is electromagnetic energy. And we know from the first law of thermodynamics and physics that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. We also know that everything is made of molecules, which in turn are made of atoms, which in turn are composed of electrons, protons, and neutrons, and they in turn are composed of a smaller particle known as a quantum. Now, for all of our physics friends, technically an electron is a quantum because an electron is 1/1800th the size of a proton. So I want to make sure that that is stated. And this is also where we get the term quantum physics. Now, what's fascinating about this is that everything, you, me, the radio waves this presentation is being transmitted on, the surface of the moon, the rings of Saturn, and beyond, are all at the same subatomic level made of quanta. And a lot of people say, well, this is really difficult to wrap my head around. But we've also been hearing from great spiritual teachers from the beginning of time that we're all energetically interconnected. And now through quantum physics, we know that's true because on the subatomic level, everything in our material world universe is quanta. Now, Sir Isaac Newton had quantum physics. And if he had, I think he would have been singing a very different tune than he was. Matter and energy, which include light, are composed of quanta. particles of electromagnetic energy. Nikola Tesla, inventors of all time, said that Tesla is one of the most enigmatic and geniuses in history. Let me say this. A power grid would not function. Albert Einstein, we've all heard E equals MC squared of relativity, and that energy equals mass times the speed of light. It's the relationship between energy, mass, and the speed of light. What this means is that mass and energy is neither destroyed, only transferred from one
Hey, Mark, can you hear me? Mark, you clicked mute on your camera. You have to unmute yourself. Click unmute. For some reason, you got muted. So click the microphone button. It says your microphone's not connected. Something happened to your settings.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, there we go. Yeah, we lost you for like
Can you hear me now?
30. Yeah, we lost you for like 45 seconds.
Okay. All right. So everybody saw you saw about the biophotons, correct?
If you can go back a couple slides, let's see where you were.
Hold on. I'll be happy to, because this is important stuff. All right. Did I lose everybody at biophotons?
Yes.
All right. Biophotons.
Yes.
Here's the scoop, everybody. Our cells create flashes of light that are not visible to the human eye. And what's really fascinating about this isn't like fireflies or bioluminescence. These are invisible to the human eye. And scientists, starting in the 1920s in Russia, but it's been recently reaffirmed by the most recent scientific discoveries, are that biophoton streams consist of short quasi-periodic bursts similar to those used to send binary data. In other words, our cells communicate to each other using flashes of light. Now, you ever step on a tack or a Lego and immediately it hits your brain? You know that it hurts. And according to MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the National Institute of Health, there is evidence that biophoton emission correlates with neural activity, suggesting biophotons could act as neural communication signals. In other words, your nervous system operates using biophotons, flashes of light. That's why if you step on something like a tack, you feel it immediately because it's moving at the speed of light. So, biophoton emission is a general phenomenon of all living systems. Biophotons originate from a coherent photon field within the living organism, its function being intra and intercellular regulation and communication. And it's not just in human beings. Recently, when I was at the Muir Redwood Forest in California, I discovered, with the help of park rangers, that the roots of the redwood trees and other trees seem to interact with each other, and they use the mycelium fungus on the tips of their roots. And the mycelium fungus has biophotons, as do the roots of trees. And it appears that the mycelium fungus can direct the roots of the redwood trees and other trees. All plants do this, but the redwood's been studied extensively to find nutrients, water, and also trees help each other that have been injured. So biophoton communication between cells is not just limited to human beings or mammals. It is even present in plants and fungi as well. We are light beings. Albert Einstein was absolutely correct. From the cosmic to the subatomic, the common denominator between science and spirituality is light. Light is how humans perceive the spiritual energy of the divine power we call God. The word enlightenment. Enlightenment in its basic sense means beginning to understand something. In the spiritual sense, enlightenment is an awareness of our connection to the eternal light. Enlightenment is a term I developed in my book, Evidence of Eternity. It's awareness of the light within. So from the subatomic within us all the way to the cosmic, we are light beings. Neuroscience is the study of the human brain, and the brain is a carbon-12 and salt resonator floating in water. It does have an electromagnetic field, and even though the brain is only 2% of the body's weight, it consumes over 20% of its energy. The official position is that the brain creates consciousness through chemical reactions and electrical impulses, but neuroscientists can't explain how. To Professor Hans-Peter Dor at the Max Planck Institute of Physics in Germany. Now, I've spent a lot of time in Germany, and you're never going to find anyone more serious than a German physicist. And that the brain is like a computer hard drive. When the hard drive dies, we do not lose this consciousness, this information. The body were immortal. Then Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hammerhoff and Roger Ekanoff and Professor Bandyopadhyay all chimed in, and I'm really proud of Sir Roger Penrose. I attended Oxford University. It's my alma mater, and I'm honored to say that Sir Roger Penrose recently won the Nobel Prize in Physics. And what Sir Roger has said about consciousness is that it derives from quantum vibrations within the brain's neurons. In the spiritual sense, consciousness has been here all along. So what are these physicists saying? See, for centuries, science has been in one quarter, okay, had the Newtonian reductive materialists, and faith has been in the other. But now, through the advent of quantum physics and these discoveries about biophotons and quanta and the nature of consciousness, we are now seeing that consciousness pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and moves on after the body dies. Like Professor Hans-Peter Dor said, the brain is like a computer hard drive. Think about it. Your computer did not create the Windows program on it, did not create the data on it. It simply hosts it. And when that hard drive crashes, the information lives on. So it's really fascinating that we live in a time where now some of the world's top quantum physicists are on board with the concept of eternal life. We are not these bodies. We are energy, which is referred to in the realms of psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy as consciousness. In the arena of faith, it is known as the soul or the spirit. It's what makes us unique, and it includes our personality, observations, memories, knowledge, and love. Consciousness is pure energy. It pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and then lives on after physical death, meaning it's eternal. Consciousness is capable of perception that exceeds our 5 physical senses of sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. It is also capable of communicating with other dimensions beyond our material world. So what are we? Well, think of your body like a car. Some people have really hot cars, and you look at that hot car and you say, you know, I'd really like to take a spin on that. And then others of us, well, maybe not so much. But the truth is, our body is simply like a car. And when the car stops working, we get out and move on. This brings me to physics and faith. What does physics teach us? That energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. Every great belief system teaches us that the soul, the spirit, consciousness pre-exists the body, comes into the body, and lives on after physical death. And after years of research and a lifetime as a psychic medium, I developed the term the electromagnetic soul, the EMS. And that's a 21st century term to describe what we really are, that a soul, a spirit, consciousness, which is eternal electromagnetic energy. Now, I've received some criticism, particularly from people in the realms of faith, who said that, well, electromagnetic soul sounds rather technical. But one of the great luminaries of our time, one of the top afterlife scientists, said, let's look at electromagnetic soul like this, that the word soul stands for the source of universal love. And that is my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Gary Schwartz from the University of Arizona, who believes that the electromagnetic soul theory does explain the nature of eternal life and spirit communication and near-death experiences. The electromagnetic soul may be analogized as a drop of water. So in other words, when you die, that drop of water leaves your body and then plunges into the eternal sea of soul. Make no mistake, you're still an individual. It's just that now you're a drop in this infinite ocean, this collective consciousness. That's also why during spirit communication, spirits oftentimes are able to transmit information that far exceeded the scope of anything they knew here in this world. One of the greatest psychics on record was Edgar Cayce. He would go into a trance-like state and be able to transmit information of a medical nature that far exceeded anything that he knew. I've noticed this with readings that I do and some of my colleagues. And so when you're communicating with a spirit, you're not just communicating with that lone spirit. That spirit is interlinked with other spirits, connected to other spirits, connected to other spirits. And this wealth of healing knowledge is a gift from the divine. The human eye can only detect light wave frequencies between 430 and 770 terahertz. Human ears can only hear wave frequencies between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. These ranges are only a fraction of the sound and light frequency range. Their perception of our physical in a mirror. Ever feel you see a spirit in your peripheral vision, then you turn and the spirit seems to vanish? Have you ever tried to look directly at a comet, but you can't see it clearly when you look directly at it, but you can see the comet much more clearly when you shift your focus away from it and observe it in your peripheral vision? This is due to the structure of the human eye. Within the retina, there's two structures, rods and cones. Cones are at the center of the retina, and they detect color and details. They're daytime vision. Rods are on the periphery of the retina, and they're light sensitive. So what happens is when you see a spirit, you're picking up the subtle light patterns with the rods because the rods are light sensitive, but they don't see color. This is why in literature, in paintings, in pop culture, spirits, quote unquote, ghosts tend to have that shadowy white and gray look because when people generally see them, they're viewing them through the rods in the periphery of the retina. And that's why when you pick up on a spirit in your peripheral vision, you turn, it seems like the spirit vanishes. Well, it doesn't. It's just that you're switching from rods to cones. And I teach paranormal investigators this when we're on investigating spectral phenomenon and elementals and other types of spiritual phenomenon. Astronomers have developed what is known as averted vision, and that's a technique for when you're viewing a comet. Don't look at it directly. Instead, observe the comet with your peripheral vision, because that way you're exposing the most light-sensitive part of your eye, and you'll see faint objects better. The electromagnetic spectrum. Think of the electromagnetic spectrum as a yardstick. As you can see from the diagram, visible light is maybe about a quarter inch or so, maybe half an inch. In other words, what we are able to perceive is white light. And white light is an extremely small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, a hummingbird can see ultraviolet light. Why? Because the hummingbird has an additional cone in its retina, which enables it to see ultraviolet light, which we can't. This brings me to tetrachromats. Tetrachromats have a quote-unquote abnormal fourth gene. I don't think it's abnormal. I think it's a gift. I think it's a genetic enhancement. And tetrachromats also have a fourth cone. Instead of just the red, blue, and green, they have a yellow-green cone, which enables them to see more deeply into the yellow-green spectrum. And because of it requires 2 X chromosomes, only women can inherit this gene. So, guys, the next time you're out shopping with your lady and she tries on a dress and she says, "Does this color look good on me?" It does. She already knows it does. Just say yes, okay? And the thing is, for all the ladies listening, you may be a tetrachromat and not even know it. Why would you? Because this is how you've always seen color. You may see colors in such a more in-depth way and not realize that the people around you can't see this as much. And it gets even better. The normal eye sees 1 million colors, but tetrachromats can see 100 million colors. So everything in the material world universe has a vibration. In other words, when we're getting from molecules to atoms to electrons, protons, and neutrons to quanta, everything vibrates. All things in our universe are constantly in motion and vibrating. Even objects that appear to be stationary are in fact vibrating, oscillating, and resonating at different frequencies. And frequency is the rate at which vibrations occur. This brings me to the 5 main brainwave frequencies: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Gamma, that's when it's like you're on Final Jeopardy or you're doing a Newton's calculus homework. Your brain is cranking, running at full throttle. Beta, that's the state that we're in right now. That's the awake state. That's where you're able to perform activities of daily living. Alpha, for everybody that lives in California, I know you're very well aware of alpha. I call that the groovy baby state. And I'm not making fun of California. I'm just because alpha is when you meditate. It's when you begin to relax. It's the daydream state. It's as you start to drift off to sleep. Theta is reduced consciousness. This is the dream state. Delta, very little brainwave activity going on in delta, but it is extremely important because in the delta state, that's when your body heals and fights infections. But I want to go to the alpha theta border. As you can see, all these brainwave frequencies are within certain hertz ranges. It is right around 8 hertz, the alpha theta border, where psychic and mediumistic activity occur. This is why the most common form of spirit contact is in the dream state. I mean, think about it in scripture. There's so many incidents of angelic entities, like in Jacob's ladder, where the angel came to Joseph, warning him that Herod was going to murder, it was out to murder Jesus, so he had to get Jesus, Mary, and Joseph out of Egypt. You have so many references throughout history of people interacting with spirits in the dream state. And so that's much more accepted and common than saying, "Oh, gee, I was standing by the water cooler at work and in my peripheral vision, I saw my Aunt Martha." What I'm saying is, it is the alpha theta border where spirits are able to communicate with us. Why does it occur in the sleep state so often? Spirits are capable of identifying when you are in that receptive state. So what they do is they take their much higher frequency, remember we were just talking about frequency, and they lower their frequency and vibration until you get a frequency match. Now, for people like me, and we're not entirely sure why, I'm capable of going from the beta to the alpha theta state at 8 hertz within seconds and voluntarily, where generally it requires going into the sleep state, and it can take hours to do that for most people. So why not just use technology like an electroencephalogram or quantitative electroencephalogram to identify the EMS, the electromagnetic soul? Well, the truth is that EEG and QEEG, they're great for medical research and diagnosis, but they're neither sensitive enough nor designed to identify the electromagnetic soul, much less the afterlife frequency. And Professor Shelley Renee Joy of the California Institute of Integral Studies has said, it is entirely feasible that there are specific ranges of harmonic frequencies that interact with mind-brain systems through resonance at far higher frequencies than currently supposed. In other words, our technology is not yet sophisticated enough to tune into these higher frequencies. Nonetheless, the year 2022 was a banner year when it came to afterlife research. This 2022, I think, is going to go down in history as a huge breakthrough point in our understanding of the afterlife. In Tartu, Estonia, excuse me, an 87-year-old man started having epileptic seizures. Now, the standard protocol, they rush him to the hospital, is to hook him up to an EEG electroencephalogram and monitor his brain. Well, while that was happening, he had a massive heart attack and he died. This was the first time in history that somebody was on an EEG at the point of death. And what happened shocked the medical world. All 5 brainwave frequencies, delta, theta, alpha, and beta, went off the scale. Dr. Vicente said that just before and after the heart stopped working, we saw changes in a specific band of neural oscillations, the so-called gamma oscillations. In other words, all 5 of his brainwave frequencies surged. They didn't anticipate that. They figured brainwave frequencies would have been slowing down and fading out. Dr. Zimmer, a neurosurgeon from the University of Louisville, said the brain may be playing a last recall of important life events just before we die, similar to the ones in near-death experiences. Then came, in November of 2022, the lucid dying study, which was put on by New York University, and it was conducted in both the US and the UK. 567 people at 25 different hospitals. When they started going into cardiac failure and CPR was being administered, they were hooked up to an EEG. And what was noted is that there was massive brainwave spike in all subjects. 1 in 5 of the survivors reported lucid experiences of death, which weren't hallucinations, illusions, or delusions. In other words, this was in conformity with what happened in Tartu, Estonia, but now we have close to 600 samples, and of the people who did survive, 1 in 5 reported an NDE. And according to Dr. Sam Parnia, who is the lead doctor and scientist on the study, he said, identifying measurable electrical signals of lucid and heightened brain activity together with similar stories of recalled death experiences suggests that the human sense of self and consciousness may not stop completely around time of death. In other words, consciousness, the soul, the spirit, survives physical death. Now, granted, Dr. Parnia wasn't ready to come out and say just that, but the data correlates that all 5 brainwave frequencies surge with electromagnetic activity, and based on the recollections of the people who had near-death experiences, that their soul, their spirit, left the body and came back to the body. In other words, your consciousness, the who and what you are, lives on after physical death. So we have the afterlife frequency, the other side, and the material world dimension. Both of these are energetic systems. Once again, molecules, atoms, electrons, protons, and neutrons, and then on the subatomic level, quanta. So both systems utilize electromagnetic energy, but they vibrate at different frequencies. However, there are times when the two systems overlap, and I call that overlap the NDE zone. And this is where interdimensional communication occurs. Mediumship, visitations, near-death experiences, shared-death experiences, deathbed visions, out-of-body experiences all occur during a frequency alignment between our material world dimension and the afterlife frequency. So think of our world as AM radio, the other side is FM radio, and sometimes there's a frequency overlap, and that is what we call interdimensional communication or spirit contact. How does interdimensional communication happen? This brings us to quantum entanglement. According to Edgar Mitchell, who's an astronaut, Navy pilot, founder of IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, he said that when subatomic matter is in a process together, subsequently, the subatomic particles go apart from each other and go across the universe. When they do this, they will remain entangled. This means if you do something to one, the other responds instantaneously. Let me explain. Scientists fully believe that if two subatomic particles are separated, even if they're 1 billion miles apart, if you do something to one, the other reacts instantaneously. In other words, they are energetically linked. That's what quantum entanglement is. Frequency beacons is a term I developed to explain the two-way street of interdimensional communication. Think of everybody that you know and love, either on planet Earth or in spirit, being interconnected by a three-dimensional spider web. Okay, let's take the spider out of it. But how does the spider web work? Through vibration. Okay, something hits the spider web, it sends a vibration. Well, let's say you're grieving very heavily and you're thinking about a deceased loved one, and all of a sudden you feel that person's presence around. You just sent out a frequency beacon, they're picking up on it and they're coming to you. Ever been driving in your car and suddenly you're prompted to turn on the radio and there's that song that touches your heartstrings? Guess what? Spirits can direct you to do particular things. I write about frequency beacons extensively in my book, The Afterlife Frequency, and I can guarantee that pretty much everyone viewing this has experienced a frequency beacon, whether or not they fully understood that's what was happening. So interdimensional communication occurs when a spirit, an electromagnetic soul, transmits an electromagnetic impulse which is received by the brain. This wave of frequency is then translated by the brain into recognizable information. So think of a medium as like a cell phone. So in other words, mediums are like phones through which interdimensional communication occurs. Let me explain this a little bit more clearly. As a medium, what a spirit does is he, she, or they, a group of them, transmit an electromagnetic impulse which goes into my brain. Then that interfaces with the electromagnetic field in my brain and is then converted into recognizable concepts based on memories, feelings, and cultural associations that I have. So in other words, I was doing a reading for somebody recently, and I kept seeing an image of Disney, okay? And the client said, well, wait a second, he died in Orlando, Florida, which is right near Disney. And so that was how the spirit was getting me to the concept of Orlando. There was a lot more to it than that. But that's a very basic way to understand this. But what about people who aren't mediums? The truth is, everybody's capable of experiencing interdimensional communication, whether or not you're a medium. And I explained this in the Afterlife Frequency. how to recognize, accept, feel, and trust messages from spirits. And that's what I refer to as the raft technique. It's when you can recognize the sign from a spirit, accept it for real, as real. It's the third step, feeling without overthinking. That's where people, well, this must be my imagination. This can't be. It's got to be a coincidence. That's where people will torpedo the experience. But once you start working the raft technique, then you'll get through that and begin trusting the messages that you're receiving. Deathbed visions. People who are dying will oftentimes report seeing or hearing deceased loved ones. Could be human spirits, animal spirits, like here. This woman is connecting with her deceased husband and her beloved pet. People will report seeing religious and spiritual beings and or beautiful scenery. And Dr. Jeffrey Long, who's the founder of NDERF, the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, has created the world's largest database on deathbed visions and near-death experiences. And if you've been in close proximity to people who are dying, maybe they're in hospice or they're in long-term care, and they start talking about people who have passed, this is a deathbed vision. This brings me to Betty White, our favorite Golden Girl. All right, Betty White. I mean, I can't remember a time in my life when Betty White wasn't on television. She is like the history of television. And back in the 1960s, she met Alan Ludden, who was a game show host. They got married. They were just the ultimate couple. She loved him so much, said that they both said, "You're the love of my life." And he died in 1981. And Betty White never remarried. She always talked about how he was just the greatest thing. Betty died just a couple weeks short of her 100th birthday. I believe she died on New Year's Eve of 2022, just as it was getting ready to become 2023. And her caretaker and actress Vicki Lawrence, who Vicki Lawrence was the star of Mama's Family, and she was in the Carol Burnett show, said that just before Betty White died, she opened her eyes, she looked up, smiled, and said, "Alan." Steve Jobs, right before he died, he was surrounded by his family, and all of a sudden he looked up and started saying, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." And his family members said he was trying to describe what he was seeing. George Floyd, now this is one of the most controversial cases in the last half century, probably. But I watched, it's very painful to watch this video of when the police officer was on his neck and he died. And I'm not here to play politics but as a near-death experience researcher, I found this very, very interesting because he said, "Mama, I'm through," right before he died. And it appeared to me that there was a look of recognition in his eyes. It is very possible, because a lot of people were filming this, videoing this on their cell phones, that George Floyd's death may be the most heavily documented deathbed vision in history. A shared death experience occurs at the time of a person's death. People around that person who are not in danger of dying, they begin to observe phenomena associated with the energy of a spirit leaving the body. They may see, and this isn't just family members or friends, this could be hospice personnel, other medical personnel. They may see a transparent replica of the dying person leave the body. They may describe a feeling of their own bodies rising to accompany their dying loved one toward the light. They may hear incredibly beautiful music. They may actually see the spirits of the dying person's loved ones who have transitioned. They may see a brilliant light filling the room at the time of death. And Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, these are his observations in the science of near-death experiences. As a medium, I've been called to the bedside of a number of people who have died, and I have personally experienced all of these. But what's much more significant is people that were with me, family members, friends, hospice personnel who are not mediums, also experienced all of these phenomena. There's an overlap between deathbed visions and shared death experiences. So the person who's dying is having a deathbed vision. People in close proximity will start seeing this as well, which is why it's one aspect of a shared death experience. Now, here's how this happens. So we have the afterlife frequency. That's, the FM radio. We're here in AM radio. And there's a person who is transitioning. Their electromagnetic soul's getting ready to leave their body. So it's getting, it's pulsating. It's beginning to overlap with the electromagnetic souls, the brainwave frequencies of people in close proximity. So what's going on here is, as the person is beginning to see spirits, people nearby are getting, they're getting radio frequency or frequency overlap. They're picking up on it as well. And then as the person transitions into the light, that's why people in close proximity can see light surging out of the dying person's body. They may actually see a transparent replica going into the light, and that's why they may also feel like they're being lifted up, because that is their frequency overlap with that of the afterlife frequency. So, spirit communication technology. Thomas Edison believed he could develop the spirit phone. That was one of the last things he was working on when he died. And he believed that he could develop technology sensitive enough to communicate with discarnate intelligence, meaning a spirit. More recently, Dr. Gary Schwartz is developing technology known as the soul phone. And Dr. Mark Pitstick is a spokesperson of the Soul Phone Project. I'm honored to be on the board of directors of the Soul Phone Project, and I'm one of the research mediums that work with Dr. Schwartz and with Dr. Pitstick. And let me tell you something. This is amazing, and I think it's only a matter of time before we have technology to communicate with spirits. In the meantime, we, as human beings, are the technology. And this brings me to the best friend I ever had, Billy. We met when we were 11 years old. Our birthdays are a week apart. We grew up together, went to junior high school, college together. After college, I went to law school. Billy went to Asia and began to teach Japanese executives conversational English. He was a linguistics genius. He could speak Japanese, Indonesian, Thai, spoke some Cantonese. And I went to visit him in Japan, and this is at Kinkakuji, the Golden Temple. Absolutely beautiful. But I was raised Catholic, as was he. My mom's family was Italian. His family was Irish. But he was an atheist. And our entire lives, I don't want to call it an argument. It was a spirited debate. He didn't believe in an afterlife. He said there's no technology to prove it. There's no science. And of course, I argued, pun intended, the other side, that indeed there was. And he always used to say, I don't really believe in an afterlife, but that psychic thing you do and that's talking to spirits really freaks me out. But like I said, he was the best friend. He was like my brother. I mean, we just had been through life together. In fact, I even performed his wedding ceremony. He met a beautiful woman from Japan, and they asked me, because I was a notary in addition to being an attorney, and that was one of the best days of my life. I'll never forget. We're at this oceanfront hotel where his parents, my parents, all of our friends from high school, college, half my fraternity brothers were there, and there I was standing on the podium, and there's my best friend, and now my new best friend, his wife. It doesn't get better than that. That was one of those shining moments in life where you just realize it doesn't get better than that. Everybody that I loved, that meant something to me, was there that day. And sadly, Billy had always struggled with depression and alcoholism. And about 5 years later, he took his own life. needless to say, I was devastated. Not long after that, I was asked to speak at a paranormal conference at the Estes Park at the Stanley Hotel. And I had just given my presentation, and I was seated at a table where I was signing books. And the place was filled with paranormal investigators, a bunch of people from TV were there. And so I'm signing books, and my manager, Rocky, and she travels with me on all my trips, and I've known Rocky forever. She was walking around looking at some of the other exhibits, and she walked by a table where all these paranormal investigation equipment, which all scan different frequencies within the electromagnetic spectrum. But when she walked by the table that was displaying the spirit box scanner, all of a sudden she stopped because she heard a voice come out of the spirit box scanner that said, "Get Mark." So all of a sudden I hear Rocky and the guy selling us, his name is Chris, they're yelling, "Mark, get over here." And I'm looking up and they're like, "What?" They go, "Get over here now." And I get up and I run over, and of course, all these people are crowding around, and I walk up and all of a sudden I hear, "Dude." And I stopped and I looked at Rocky, and tears were flowing out of her eyes. She goes, "Mark, I know that voice." And he goes, "Love you, bro." It was Billy's voice. Rocky said, "Oh my God, that's Billy." And I burst into tears. And the thing is, we were from the surfing culture of East Coast Central Florida. And, he called me Mark, but he always just, "Hey, dude. But the last thing that he ever did say to me in this world, I remember it was a couple of years before, and he was with his wife, and I hugged him. He goes, "Love you, bro." And here I am in front of this spirit box, and his voice comes out of it. And the investigator said, "This is highly unusual." It called for Mark. It said, "Get Mark." And then you both were able to identify the exact person, the exact spirit that was communicating through this. And then it dawned on me, it was the atheist, my lifelong friend, who told me that there's no science, there's no technology to prove the existence of spirits or an afterlife, who chose a piece of technology to communicate to me. Thank you, Billy. The spirit box scanner was invented by an electrical engineer who I believe is a genius. His name is Gary Galka, and he invented it after his daughter Melissa passed. And I have the pleasure of meeting Gary Galka, and we're both in an episode of a brand new Discovery Channel series entitled Destinations of the Damned. It's Zach Bagans' new series, and there I am with Gary, and we're both on a paranormal investigation. And I can't say enough good things about him, and I have to say that Destinations of the Damned was just an absolutely amazing experience. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm Mark Anthony, JD, Psychic Explorer. Please visit my website, afterlifefrequency.com. I'm also a VIP executive contributor for Best Holistic Life magazine. All my books are bestsellers and award winners. And if you go to my website, afterlifefrequency.com, I cordially invite all of you to sign up for my newsletter, because it'll keep you up to date on what I'm doing. I'm going to be in Houston in late October, and I've got spirit communication events in Tampa, November 8th. And you can find out about my books, booking readings, and also please call into my show, The Psychic and the Doc. I do many readings on callers in tandem with Dr. Pat's amazing insights. She's a world-renowned behavioral psychologist. This is part of our ministry, is all about helping people understand that physical death is not the end of life. I want to thank all of you. Special thanks to Neil Gower, to Ash, to all my colleagues who are speaking, and especially to the audience. Many blessings. Namaste. God bless.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was amazing. You connected the dots between science and spirituality in such an easy to digest way. If you had some final words of advice for the viewers, for those on that journey of awakening, and maybe those who are awakening their sensitivities and abilities for the first time, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say that my raft technique, how to recognize, accept, feel, and trust spirits, I explain that in great detail in the afterlife frequency, and it's very easy. It's easy to do. And the thing is, that's really amazing, Ash, is wherever I go in the country. I just got back from the Ancient Mysteries Conference at the Edgar Cayce, where I presented the Secrets, Mysteries, and Curse of Tutankhamun, and that was fun because I love Egyptology and being an attorney. I used to be a prosecutor, criminal defense lawyer, and psychic medium, so I got to put all of that together and create a whodunit on what killed King Tut. But the thing is, wherever I go in the country, people come up to me and say that the raft technique has really helped them a lot. And it's quite an interesting story how I developed that, but I don't want to take up too much time. But if we have a few minutes, I can tell you that if you'd like.
We do. Yeah, we have a few minutes, and I think we'd like to hear.
So I was here in my office, and I was working on the afterlife frequency, and I was trying to figure out, how do I explain to people who are not mediums that you can have a mediumistic experience? And then the dreaded writer's block. It's like writer's block, and everybody who is listening, who's ever written anything, but particularly the authors, that you got to get away. So I figured, all right, I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. I live near the ocean, which is normally great, except this last week we had Hurricane Milton, which was not a whole lot, but thank goodness everyone and my family members, we made it through. And I thought I was going to go for a walk on the beach. But what happened, Ash, is I'm going down the driveway, and all of a sudden I'm getting pulled in a different direction. And I'm getting pulled towards this bike path. So I thought, okay, and I'm feeling cold chills and tingles. And I said, okay, this is spiritual activity. So I'm walking on the bike path, and I see these two things shining. And I walk up, and it's a nickel and a penny. And I'm going to pick it up, and both my parents have passed, and I could hear my mom's voice. She was Italian, okay? And Italians, we have a superstition for everything, all right? And I hear her voice saying, if they're face down, it's bad luck. And then I hear my dad's voice, it's money, grab it. So I'm laughing, okay? Because it was just like hanging out with my parents. So here I am, I'm holding these 2 coins to go, oh, 6 cents. And I go, 6 cents. And then I knew, and the cold chills and tingles. Now, the cold chills and tingles, that's why a lot of people think spirit contact is scary, because it's the same physiological response in fight or flight. But what it is, we're interacting with the electromagnetic soul, or in this case, souls of spirits. And I said, all right, Mom, Dad, what do you want me to know? And suddenly I saw an image of my dad. He was a Navy SEAL. He was a scuba diver, a swimming instructor at the Y. And he used to have this blue canvas raft with these yellow rubber like bumpers on it. And we used to like wave ride when I was a kid and all that. And I saw him standing in the ocean up to his waist holding the raft. And I thought, okay, and this is what you do. You don't start overthinking. You go, what do you want me to know? And then I heard my parents in unison say, teach people to recognize signs from spirits, accept the contact is real, feel it without overthinking, trust the message. And then raft! That's why I was holding the raft. And I ran back to my office. The words flew out of me. I must have written like 20 paragraphs. And that's how the raft technique came to me, because they had to walk me through it so I could understand how to explain it to people who aren't mediums. And that's just one of the things that you'll learn in the afterlife frequency. My first book, Never Letting Go, that's a guide on the journey through grief. And that's for when you're in that stunned phase and you don't know what to do, how to cope. It's also a good present for people who are doing that. When I was on the Never Letting Go tour, Ash, people kept asking me questions like, is reincarnation real? Do animals have souls? What happens with suicide victims? Do they go to hell? Is there a God? Is there a heaven? And so that became the basis for writing Evidence of Eternity. And then the scientific aspects of Evidence of Eternity were so well received that led me to writing The Afterlife Frequency. But for all the people, when you start hearing quantum physics and science, trust me, I did not write an algebra textbook. All of my books are illustrated with stories that you can relate to, because I suffered through enough boring books in the practice of law that I promise I won't inflict that on you. So that's some of the things that you're going to learn from my books and The Afterlife Frequency. And I'm very, very honored that both Evidence of Eternity and The Afterlife Frequency were up for Pulitzer Prizes. So
that's amazing, Mark. Thank you so much.
Very overwhelming.
Yeah, for leading the way in, this spiritual movement. I think you're one of the forefronters and what I would consider an OG, helping us all, walk that path. So thank you for that. And thank you for your amazing presentation today with Portal to Ascension.
Thank you.